Imagine this. You're walking down a crowded street. People rush past you, eyes glued to screens, minds tethered to routines, hearts beating in predictable rhythms. Everyone seems to know their place, their script, their purpose. But then, in this sea of certainty and compliance, one face stands out. Not because of beauty, not because of fame, but because of something unsettling, something society has no vocabulary for, a mind that sees too much. You notice the way this person looks at the world, not with the dull acceptance of the crowd, but with an awareness that feels almost dangerous, as if they're quietly dissecting the mechanisms everyone else blindly obeys, as if they see the invisible strings pulling at the masses, guiding their choices, shaping their beliefs, controlling their fears. There's something in their gaze, clarity mixed with rebellion, and suddenly you realize something frightening. Intelligence, real, raw, unfiltered intelligence, doesn't blend in. It disrupts. It questions. It threatens. Now imagine society as a grand stage. On this stage, everyone plays a role they never auditioned for. Some perform willingly, others don't even realize they're acting. But every now and then, someone intelligent enough steps off the stage. They walk behind the curtains, examine the scaffolding, and dare to ask the one question nobody else even thinks to consider. Who built all of it? And why are we still following the script? That is when society feels the tremor, because the crowd is comfortable in its chaos. It prefers noise over introspection, entertainment over truth, conformity over independence. People applaud simplicity and crucify complexity. They celebrate the familiar and fear the unknown. And anyone who refuses to be shaped by the collective mold becomes an anomaly, a glitch in the system, an unpredictable variable that must be explained, silenced, or pushed into the shadows. Think about that for a moment. Why is it that a person who understands deeply, who sees clearly, who thinks independently, becomes a source of discomfort? Why do people avoid those who ask difficult questions? Why do they mock what they do not understand? Why does society praise intelligence in theory yet quietly punish it in practice? You've seen it. Children labeled too curious, students ridiculed for thinking differently, adults shamed for refusing to follow the expected path. You felt it. The quiet tension when you ask a question people don't want to answer. The subtle resistance when you offer a perspective that disrupts someone's worldview. The unspoken message, don't think too much, don't see too clearly, don't stand out. You've lived it. That strange isolation that comes from noticing patterns others ignore, the burden of awareness, the loneliness of clarity. So imagine this. What if intelligent people scare society not because they're superior, but because they illuminate everything society works so hard to avoid? What if intelligence is threatening because it forces people to confront truths that dismantle their identities, their beliefs, their illusions? What if the fear isn't of the intelligent person, but of what they reveal? Consider the paradox. People crave truth yet cling to comforting lies. They admire thinkers yet attack them when thinking goes too far. They praise individuality, yet punish anyone who truly embodies it. Isn't it strange? Isn't it unsettling? Isn't it revealing? And here's the most haunting part. You may not realize it, but society has already taught you to fear your own intelligence. It has conditioned you to dim your light, soften your voice, and shrink your thoughts so you don't disturb the fragile comfort of those around you. Why? Because once you begin to think for yourself, you stop being controllable. Once you question the rules, you become unpredictable. And once you see the truth, you can't be manipulated by illusions. Ask yourself this quietly, honestly. What if the reason society fears intelligent people is because intelligence is the first step toward freedom? And freedom terrifies those who benefit from your obedience. Let that sink in. Every culture, every era, every system, whether political, social, or ideological, has always resisted the minds that refuse to bow. The thinkers, the visionaries, the rebels, the ones who dared to say, "This doesn't make sense," the ones who refused to stay asleep. And now here you are, standing at the threshold of the same ancient tension, the same silent war between conformity and consciousness. The question becomes, are you willing to see what society desperately wants you to ignore? Are you ready to understand why intelligent people scare the world? And why that fear is the key to everything that follows? Because once you understand the roots of this fear, You will never look at society or yourself the same way again. Now we step into the next layer. The hidden psychological and philosophical origins of this fear. You felt it before. The quiet tension that fills a room when someone asks a question that cuts deeper than anyone is prepared to go. A question that makes people shift uncomfortably, avoid eye contact, or rush to change the topic. It's subtle, but unmistakable. Society doesn't merely dislike deep thinkers. It instinctively defends itself against them. To understand why, you must look beneath the surface, into the psychological and philosophical foundations that shape human behavior more than any law or institution ever could. Start here. Human beings by nature are wired for survival, not truth. This is where the hidden problem begins. From the earliest tribes to modern nations, survival depended on cohesion, on agreement, conformity, shared beliefs, predictable actions. A group that questioned too much fractured. A group that followed a single narrative thrived. And so, over thousands of years, something primal embedded itself deep within the human psyche. We fear whatever destabilizes the group, and nothing destabilizes a group faster than an intelligent mind that refuses to obey. Carl Jung wrote that humans fear their own unconscious more than anything else. Why? Because inside that unconscious lies everything society tells us to suppress. Our doubts, our questions, our contradictions, our forbidden thoughts. The intelligent person, the one who sees clearly, becomes a mirror reflecting these hidden shadows back to the world. People don't hate the intelligent individual. They hate being reminded of the truths they bury. Jean-Paul Sartre believed that human beings are terrified of freedom, not because freedom is bad, but because it demands responsibility. It forces people to confront the reality that their lives are not dictated by fate, society, or destiny, but by decisions. Intelligent people expose this fact simply by existing. They live with awareness. They make conscious choices. They question inherited beliefs. Their very presence whispers, "You could think for yourself too, but you don't." And society resents them for it. But the fear goes even deeper. Nietzsche argued that most people cling to moral and social structures not because they are true, but because they provide protection from existential chaos. The world is terrifying when viewed without filters. The intelligent mind tends to break those filters. It sees the machinery behind morality, the illusions behind authority, the emptiness behind certain cultural norms. To someone who depends on these illusions for psychological stability, the intelligent person becomes a threat to their inner world. Not physically, but existentially. Intelligence threatens identities. Intelligence threatens comfort. Intelligence threatens the stories people tell themselves to stay sane. This is why people often respond with hostility, sarcasm, or avoidance when confronted with uncomfortable truths. They aren't defending their beliefs. They're defending themselves from the collapse of meaning. Arthur Schopenhauer described this as the will to illusion, the human tendency to reject truths that disrupt our emotional equilibrium. According to him, most people prefer illusions that soothe them over truths that challenge them. Intelligent people disrupt these illusions simply by pointing out inconsistencies, by saying, "This doesn't add up." Imagine how destabilizing that is. It's like someone turning on the lights in a room where everyone has agreed to sit blindfolded. The blindfold isn't there because people love darkness. It's there because it shields them from the overwhelming intensity of seeing everything clearly. The intelligent person tears the blindfold, and society panics. Even Aldous Huxley warned that people do not want freedom as much as they want comfort. They do not want truth as much as they want pleasure, distraction, and routine. A thinking mind disrupts all three. But intelligence threatens something even more ancient: hierarchy. From childhood, people are conditioned to respect authority, follow rules, and accept established systems without question. Schools reward obedience far more than curiosity. Workplaces promote predictability over creativity. Families praise conformity and punish deviation. The intelligent person breaks this evolutionary hierarchy, not with violence, but with understanding. A single question like "why do we do this" can unravel decades of conditioning, and here lies the real psychological root. Most people do not think, they imitate. They adopt beliefs rather than form them. They follow scripts written long before they were born. Intelligent people, true intelligent people, write their own scripts, and that alone is enough to unsettle the world. Viktor Frankl once said that people fear meaninglessness more than suffering. When you think deeply, you expose meaninglessness in many societal rituals and cultural expectations. The intelligent mind doesn't just observe the world, it dissects it. It sees patterns, hypocrisies, illusions. It reveals the absurdity behind behaviors society treats as sacred, and this is the philosophical tension at the heart of the problem. Intelligence is disruptive. Intelligence destabilizes. Intelligence reveals. Intelligence liberates. Liberation sounds beautiful, until you realize that most people aren't ready for it, because freedom of thought forces you to dismantle the comforting illusions that shield you from existential dread. It forces you to confront the terrifying truth that your life, identity, and beliefs might not be your own. This is why intelligent people scare society. They challenge the unconscious forces that hold society together. They threaten illusions people depend on. They reveal truths most people cannot emotionally handle. And beneath all this lies a deeper question. One that haunts every culture, every era, every mind that has ever dared to think. If society fears intelligent people, what does that say about society? And what does it say about you? Now, with the psychological and philosophical roots exposed, it's time to explore the next layer. The unseen consequences of this fear, how they silently shape lives, relationships, and entire civilizations. You rarely see it happening, not because it's subtle, but because it begins in places no one is taught to look. The consequences of society's fear of intelligent people do not appear in explosions or revolutions. They emerge quietly, in daily interactions, in silent judgments, in the invisible shaping of expectations and behaviors. They form a shadow structure, an unseen architecture, that influences everything from personal relationships to global culture. And the truth is unsettling. When society fears intelligence, it does not destroy intelligent people. It forces them to destroy themselves. Think of your own life. How many times have you held back your thoughts because you knew they would alienate you? How many times have you pretended not to notice something, just to avoid being the complicated one? How many times have you dimmed your mind to protect the comfort of others? Most intelligent people learn early that the world is not built for depth. It rewards compliance, not insight. Entertainment, not introspection. Repetition, not originality. So they adapt. They shrink their vocabulary. They soften their tone. They hide their questions. They blend into the collective noise. Not because they are afraid of thinking, but because they fear the consequences of being seen thinking. That is the first unseen consequence. Self-suppression. It begins as a survival instinct and becomes a habit. Over time, the intelligent mind becomes a prisoner of its own awareness. It knows too much to be satisfied, and yet it must pretend to know less to be accepted. The second consequence is even more corrosive. Isolation. Intelligent individuals often feel like foreigners in their own lives. They exist inside a world that seems obsessed with triviality. They watch conversations revolve around superficial topics. They observe how easily people accept narratives without skepticism. They notice contradictions others ignore. They sense emotions people cannot articulate. This creates a silent barrier, a psychological distance. You can stand in a room full of people and still feel completely alone, not because you want to be alone, but because connection requires a shared reality, and your reality is built on awareness others avoid. But the consequences expand far beyond the individual. There is a social cost, a collective consequence. When society fears intelligent people, it begins to design itself around that fear. Schools start encouraging memorization instead of curiosity. Workplaces promote obedience instead of creativity. Governments prefer citizens who consume rather than citizens who question. Media favors distraction over depth. Culture rewards those who fit in rather than those who think differently. These are not accidents. These are the natural outcomes of a world that fears minds capable of disrupting its comfort. Over time, something tragic happens. People stop aspiring to be intelligent. They aspire to be agreeable, popular, easily digestible, harmless. The intelligent person becomes the outsider, and the crowd becomes the standard. Not because the crowd is right, but because it is large enough to define normal. This is how civilizations lose their thinkers, innovators, and visionaries. Not through censorship, but through subtle social conditioning that gradually suffocates original thought. You can see it everywhere. How many prodigies grow up and become ordinary because society made ordinary the only safe identity? How many brilliant minds go unnoticed because they never learn to package their intelligence in a way that feels comfortable to the masses? How many potential breakthroughs die, not from lack of talent but from lack of permission? These are not dramatic losses. They are quiet disappearances, like stars fading from the night sky one by one. But there is an even more dangerous consequence. Cultural stagnation. When society suppresses intelligence, it locks itself into cycles of repetition. Old beliefs go unchallenged. Old systems go unquestioned. Old mistakes go uncorrected. Progress slows. Creativity shrinks. Truth becomes negotiable. The world begins to worship surface over substance, spectacle over substance, appearance over understanding. People become easier to manipulate because they no longer know how to question. They become emotionally fragile because they never learned how to tolerate complexity. They become intellectually dependent because they never learned how to think independently. This is not a flaw in the system. This is the system. A society that fears intelligence inevitably becomes a society built around distraction. Entertainment becomes the opiate. Ideology becomes the cage. Comfort becomes the currency. And then something catastrophic happens. The most intelligent minds stop participating. They withdraw. They detach. They build their own internal worlds because the external one feels too loud, too shallow, too hostile to depth. Some become silent observers. Some become cynics. Some become ghosts, present physically, absent mentally. Some escape into careers, books, solitude, or anonymity. Others crumble under the pressure of being too much for a world that prefers just enough. And society loses what it doesn't realize it needed most. The people who could have shown it a better path. This is the final unseen consequence. The decay of collective wisdom. When intelligent people hide, suppress, or exile themselves psychologically, society becomes governed not by its best minds, but by its most comfortable leaders. Not by truth, but by popularity. Not by insight, but by noise. And slowly, quietly, inevitably, everyone suffers. Yet even now at this point in the journey, you haven't reached the breakthrough. You've seen the roots. You've seen the consequences. But you haven't yet seen the rebellion, the moment everything changes. To understand that, you must go deeper. You must ask, if society fears intelligent people, then what happens when intelligent people stop fearing society? That is where the real transformation begins. You've seen the roots. You've seen the consequences. Now comes the part that society never prepares you for. The moment when you decide whether to keep shrinking or finally step into the full power of your mind. Because here's the truth no one tells you. Every intelligent person reaches a breaking point. A moment when silence becomes unbearable. A moment when the weight of suppressed thoughts becomes heavier than the fear of being misunderstood. A moment when you realize blending in is more painful than standing alone. That moment is the beginning of rebellion. But not the kind of rebellion painted in movies. Not loud, not violent, not theatrical. The rebellion of the intelligent is quieter, calmer, colder, more deliberate. It begins inside. In the place no one can police or censor, your mind. Here is the first shift. You stop apologizing for seeing the world clearly. Think about it. For years, perhaps your entire life, you've been conditioned to soften the edges of your perception, to dilute your insights, to step aside so that others won't feel threatened. But the moment you stop doing that, the moment you allow yourself to think fully, sharply, honestly, something remarkable happens. You reclaim your intellect from the prison of social approval. Every great thinker experienced this shift. Nietzsche walked away from academia and wrote truths the world wasn't ready for. Socrates refused to stop asking questions even when he was sentenced to death. Galileo chose the truth over institutional obedience. Hannah Arendt stood against the collective emotional tides of her era. Frankl found meaning in the darkest conditions imaginable. They didn't seek rebellion. Rebellion was the natural result of seeing clearly. The second shift is even more radical. You stop expecting understanding from people who have never ventured beyond their own illusions. This single realization frees you from one of the most painful traps intelligent people fall into. The belief that others will meet them at the same depth, the same clarity, the same level of introspection. But most won't. Not because they are incapable, but because they avoid the emotional cost of true reflection. Once you accept this, you stop trying to explain yourself to those who prefer ignorance. You stop wasting energy shrinking to fit their comfort. You stop offering truth where only validation is desired. You begin protecting your mind the way others protect their feelings. This shift creates distance, but it also creates power. The third shift. You begin to build a life around depth instead of convenience. This is where true rebellion takes shape. You start choosing environments, relationships, habits, and lifestyles that nourish your mind, rather than suffocate it. You stop seeking crowds and start seeking individuals. You stop participating in noise and start cultivating silence. You stop numbing yourself with distractions and begin feeding yourself with meaning. Every intelligent person must eventually confront this question. Do I want comfort or clarity? You cannot have both. Clarity demands sacrifice. Of illusions, of false friendships, of societal expectations, of the parts of you that pretended to be smaller than you are. Comfort demands only one thing: your obedience. This is why intelligent people who awaken become dangerous, not to society but to its illusions. They see through advertisement, ideology, groupthink, manipulation, cultural conditioning, political theatrics, social games. They become ungovernable, not in action, but in thought. And ungovernable minds inspire others. This leads to the fourth shift. You stop living reactively and begin living intentionally. Most people drift. They follow momentum. They mistake movement for direction. But intelligent people who break free begin to live with purpose. Not a fantasy purpose invented by self-help slogans, but a deep internal orientation toward what feels true. You start asking yourself questions society avoids. What do I value when no one is watching? Who am I when I strip away expectation, culture, and fear? What identity remains when I no longer perform for acceptance? These questions reshape your entire foundation. They separate your true self from the persona you created for survival. And once you stop wearing that persona, the world reacts differently to you, not always kindly, but authentically. Some people withdraw because they can no longer control you. Some admire you because they wish they had your courage. Some silently resent you because your existence challenges their comfort. But the rare few, will be drawn to you in a way that feels almost fated. Because depth recognizes depth. Clarity gravitates toward clarity. Awakened minds seek each other like stars forming constellations in the night. This leads to the final shift. The shift that completes the rebellion. You transform the burden of intelligence into a weapon of liberation. Instead of asking, "Why am I like this?" you begin asking, "What can I do with this?" Instead of blaming society for misunderstanding you, you begin building a life where your mind is an asset, not a liability. Instead of fighting to fit in, you begin shaping a world where you finally belong, even if that world exists only within your own creation. This is when the rebellion becomes irreversible. Not because you reject society, but because you outgrow it. You no longer fear being the outsider. You no longer fear being different. You no longer fear being intelligent. You understand now that your mind was never the problem. The systems that feared your mind, those were the problem. And beneath this truth flows a deeper one, a truth so profound it requires its own chapter. Intelligence doesn't merely threaten society. It reveals something society desperately tries to hide. To uncover that final truth, the truth behind all truths, you must step into the last and most powerful realization. There comes a moment, quiet, almost imperceptible, when everything you've learned, everything you've questioned, everything you've endured, suddenly converges into a single, overwhelming realization. A realization that does not shout but whispers. Not because it is weak, but because it is too powerful for noise. You reach this moment only after peeling away the illusions, the conditioning, the fears that society has stacked on top of you like layers of armor. And when you finally remove each one, when you stand there mentally unarmored, something astonishing becomes clear. Society never feared intelligent people. Society feared what intelligent people wake up inside others. Read that again. Let it sink in. Let it rearrange something inside you. From the beginning, the true threat was never the intelligent individual. It was the chain reaction they trigger. One mind that thinks deeply inspires another. One voice that speaks truth awakens 10 others. One person who refuses to conform gives silent permission to countless others to do the same. Intelligence scares society because it is contagious. You were taught to believe intelligence isolates you. But the deepest truth is this. A single awakened mind can unravel an entire system built on unconscious obedience. Because intelligence, real intelligence, is not about IQ, vocabulary, academic achievement, or moral superiority. It is awareness. It is the ability to see without filters. It is the refusal to swallow the narratives others force on you. It is the courage to question the foundations everyone else stands on. And when one person begins to see, others start to see too. This is the truth society hides. Your intelligence is a catalyst. But here's where the ultimate revelation emerges. Deeper than psychology, deeper than philosophy, deeper than anything culture tries to conceal. The world fears intelligent people because intelligence awakens freedom. And freedom is the one thing no system, no ideology, no hierarchy can control. Think about that. The moment you begin to think independently, you become unpredictable. You become ungovernable. You become immune to manipulation. You stop being a consumer of illusions and start becoming a creator of meaning. You stop living reactively and begin shaping your own existence. This is the real reason society subtly, and sometimes aggressively, suppresses intelligence. Intelligent people do not need permission. Not from culture. Not from authority. Not from the crowd. And systems built on compliance cannot survive too many individuals who no longer obey blindly. But the ultimate truth goes even further than that. It reveals something paradoxical, something almost spiritual. Intelligence is not a burden. It is a responsibility, because once you see clearly, you cannot pretend to be blind. Once you understand deeply, you cannot return to superficiality. Once you awaken, you cannot fall back asleep, not fully, not honestly. This responsibility does not mean saving the world or enlightening others. It means living with integrity. It means refusing to betray your own mind just to fit into a structure built for smaller selves. And here is the most haunting revelation of all. Intelligent people do not scare society because they know too much. They scare society because they cannot be controlled through fear. Fear is the currency of conformity. Fear of judgment. Fear of rejection. Fear of failure. Fear of being different. Fear of standing alone. Most people obey because they are afraid. But intelligent individuals, once awakened, begin to lose that fear. And when fear collapses, all illusions collapse with it. At that moment, you become something rare. A free mind. Not free in the political sense. Not free in the rebellious teenager sense. But free in the existential sense. Free from the internal chains that keep people repeating the same patterns, thinking the same thoughts, feeling the same anxieties that society quietly programs into them. When you reach this state, something miraculous happens. You stop being shaped by the world and start shaping the world within you. You stop seeking acceptance and start seeking truth. You stop craving validation and start valuing meaning. You stop fearing isolation and begin embracing solitude as a sacred place where clarity grows. And then, almost unexpectedly, something even more profound arises. You begin to attract other awakened minds. Not many. Never many, but enough. Because intelligent people are not isolated by nature. They are isolated by environments that cannot hold them. Once you create your own internal world, once you live with honesty and depth, others who do the same will find you, quietly, almost mystically. This too is part of the ultimate truth. Intelligent people are not meant to fit into society. They are meant to elevate it slowly, silently, one mind at a time. Some do it through art, some through leadership, some through teaching, some through innovation, some simply by living authentically in a world that fears authenticity. But all of them, every single one, carry the same ancient role. To be a mirror, to be a reminder, to be a disturbance in the collective dream, to be the one who whispers, "Wake up," even if no one wants to open their eyes. And now you understand the ultimate truth. You were never the problem. Your intelligence was never the burden. The world simply wasn't prepared for the clarity you carry. But you are. You have always been. And from this point forward, you can choose to shrink back into the expectations of others, or to embrace the rare, dangerous, liberating reality of seeing clearly. Because once you reach this level of awareness, you are no longer just a thinker. You become something far more powerful, a conscious being in an unconscious world. And there is no force more transformative than that.